本期视频是印度网红学者扎夫达近日油管直播的节选。在回答网友提问中，他谈到了中印实力对比，表示印度有很多自己都还没有意识到的优势，完全不必悲观。我们看看他是怎么说的吧。
Okay, Toji says, if a war happened with China, we'll definitely lose. I mean, if no one helps us, we'll lose. Why do people think we stand a chance with China in a head-on conflict, be it a long war or a short war? You to understand, China, I agree, is 4 times more powerful roughly than India from a hard power perspective. 4 times. Which means that if we have whatever strength we have, they have 4 times the strength and the resources, roughly. So from that perspective, we stand no chance. But you to understand that they cannot bring all their assets to bear against India if there is a war. First of all, they have so many enemies. They have made enemies everywhere. They are worried about Japan. They're worried about South Korea. They have to bolster North Korea. There is a balance of power they have to maintain. And they have to maintain the balance of power, whatever exists in the South China Sea. They have to keep on encircling Taiwan. They take out all those assets from those places to bring to bear against India. They become vulnerable in those places, which is why out of all of their assets, they can bring in at least, at most, a third or a fourth against us. And those assets are half a continent away. To transport them all the way to the India-Tibet border is going to take a long time and a lot of effort. It's not easy. That's one. Secondly, they have very little lines of communication and supply chains when it comes to Tibet. They have maybe 1 or 2 highways that connect Tibet with mainland China and 1 railway line. That's it. If India takes that out, Tibet is disconnected from China. And then there are problems in Tibet. Tibet is at a very high altitude, which means that fighter planes taking off from there have to take a lower load. But Indian fighter planes just 100 kilometers away can take off with full load. And then the Chinese assets in occupied Tibet are all exposed because there is no forest cover at all. There are lots of advantages India has, which we don't realize. So, if a war happens, India has to ensure, firstly, that it is fought on Chinese occupied Tibetan territory, not Indian territory. You have to take the war to Chinese occupied territory, because history tells us, the history of the past 2000 years tells us that China doesn't do well when it has to fight a defensive war. This is a pattern that recurs again and again and again in history. Firstly, take the fight to the Chinese occupied territory. Secondly, the war cannot last long. It has to be a short, sharp war. India has to ensure that. Cut off the Chinese communication lines, the railway line and the couple of highways. And then let's see what they do. And take out the fighter planes as quickly as possible with missiles. Of course, they also have missiles. It's not as easy as it sounds. And then there is always the last option. The Chinese know they can't afford to tempt India into exercising the last option. The Chinese have spent so much effort, energy, time in building up their economy the last 40 years. You think they are willing to lose that in one shot like that? Of course, if they threaten India beyond a point, India will have to use the last option. China can't afford that. So understand this. India is no pushover. And a war in the Himalayas is not fought with technology. The terrain, you go there. Just go to the Himalayas. Go to those areas of the world. You can't use technology there. Tanks won't work there. Drones won't work there. What will work there? Human beings. It's about quality of human beings. So India has advantages. You should not be I don't know why some Indians are so pessimistic. Don't be so pessimistic. Look at the situation. Look at the circumstances. Look at the strengths and weaknesses of both sides. China may have 4 times the strength as India, but China has 10 times the enemies as India. China is encircled. You don't understand? The Americans have encircled China. The Chinese cannot afford to take away their forces from those places. They can bring in only a quarter or maybe a third of their forces to bear against India. And of course, they can induce Pakistan to attack India at the same time. So India will have to face a 2-front war situation, but we can deal with Pakistan. And then you deal with China. And you take the fight to their territory. It's easier said than done. I know it's difficult, but the situation isn't as bleak as you make it sound or you imagine it is. Yeah, of course, we'll have our back against the wall. It'll be a difficult task. But yeah, so be it if it happens. And there could be a war with China in the coming years. So India has to militarize. India has to militarize in such a manner that if the Chinese are foolhardy enough to go to start a war against India, they will end up facing a situation they have not expected.